What about my love? Wasn't it enough? Just let me know.
We're talking about records. We're talking about teams that are undefeated. We're talking about teams that have to make an impact here over the next, what, 2-3 weeks as we got before the regular season closes out. And we have a couple perfect records, and two of those perfect records are Oregon, and the other one's Army, and the last one is Indiana. I think those are the only undefeated teams so far, right? So, but the two that are the most interesting right now is, can Oregon stay undefeated, and can Army stay undefeated as they go in against their matchup against Notre Dame this weekend? Khalid, break it down, man. How are we feeling? Which team is most likely to stay undefeated the rest of this season?
So just to lay this out, Oregon's already played 11 games, so they don't have too many chances just to lose, right? They have Washington, and then they've already locked up. You know, the Big Ten officially announced this morning that Oregon, they ran the computer. There's no possible scenario where Oregon doesn't miss out on the Big Ten championship game. So they're locked in. Presumably it's going to be against the winner of Indiana and Ohio State this weekend. So they have those two games. Washington, the winner of Indiana, Ohio State, who they already beat. Then on the other hand, you have Army, who plays Notre Dame, right, ranked in the top 10, UTSA, Navy, and the American Athletic Championship game. Although I guess the American Athletic Championship game comes first. So that's against Tulane. So Notre Dame, UTSA, Tulane, Navy. Notre Dame, top 10. Tulane moved up to 20th. Navy, formerly in the top 25, but been on a losing streak here.
Your boy Horvath has been on a skid.
Yeah, it's not been great for the midshipmen, and obviously Army has a few more games here to play, but I think you could argue here that Oregon has the single toughest matchup, right? They play the best opponent out of both of these teams. I would argue that the winner of Indiana and Ohio State is better than Army's toughest opponent in Notre Dame. Right? Like, I mean, but Notre Dame has been on a roll lately, and Army Navy, that's always going to be a good game. Even Tulane, right? They've been turning it up as of late. They are not the same team that lost to Oklahoma, who's struggling now earlier in the season. But I do think between these two teams, look, Oregon has a better chance of going undefeated. We've seen that Oregon can beat the best of the best, right? Even if it was a close call against Ohio State, we've seen them compete in that kind of scenario. Even if it was at home, we've seen them do it. They've proved it. And we just don't quite know with Army, right? This game against Notre Dame is going to be a really good litmus test for them, because you look at a team like Boise State, right, who's not a Power 4 team, but they've already played now 3 ranked teams, right?
Yep.
I believe they're 2-1 now. So because you beat Washington State, you beat UNLV, and then you lost to Oregon on a game-winning field goal. So you know that Boise State can compete with the best of the best. Army, you're still waiting to see it, right? They're undefeated, yes, but you need to see them do it. So I think that Notre Dame game is going to tell us a lot about their chances going forward, but it could even be a loss, right? In which case, they're out of it. So I think Oregon has the better chances here, because then you still have to play UTSA, who's not quite as good this year, and then Tulane, undefeated in the conference. Navy, that's always going to be a spectacle.
Yep.
It's like you're rooting for Army, right? Aside from the fact that they run the triple option, that they're undefeated after being, quite frankly, trash for a while, and the fact that they are a military academy, all these things, it's easy to root for Army. But I mean, come on, I'm gonna keep it a buck here, and Oregon has a much better chance of going undefeated, because comparatively, compared to the teams they play, Oregon should be favored in both of their remaining games, while Army's got a little bit of an uphill battle. But hey, if they beat Notre Dame, that could easily change.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a trick question, because I think them equally can both take a loss, right? And I kind of account for the regular season whatever their championship games are going to be. Because Army versus Tulane right now is a definite. I think Army would lose that game. Do I think they'll be competitive? I think they'll definitely lose that game. Notre Dame, it's just they've already proved that. I mean, you are what your record says you are sometimes, and again, a lot of these games aren't flukes. I think when you get to the regular season, if you're letting up on teams, that's the worst thing that you can do, and you're just using it as a kind of a sorry ass excuse, right? Northern Illinois losing to them, they were actually getting kind of beat down that game. You know, Northern Illinois was driving several times, and they were a third down conversion away from making that team, you know, going up by a couple more scores. I mean, it wasn't fairly close. The scoreboard said it was close, but like Northern Illinois was legitimately stomping them in certain parts of that game. Now, on the other hand, you have Oregon going against Washington. I hate bringing the history scenario up. I really do. But how many times has Dan Lanning beat Washington?
It's none, right?
He's always taken the L to Washington.
Both years there he's been coaching against Kalen DeBoer, who's no longer there.
And I'll tell you what, like, yeah, you coaching against Kalen DeBoer, who's legit, right? And we'll see what he's doing, and he's kind of proving the doubters wrong in his own right, regardless of what some people want to say. We had this one chick on TikTok talking about that they're losing recruits and they're in the number 3 recruiting class right now. Like, stop. Stop it. Like, that's not happening. Dan Lanning is 0-3 against Washington. And I would hate to say that he could go 0-4. And Washington is a scary team. I mean, to be honest, they haven't exceeded expectations for me quite yet. I predicted them to lose about 7 games this year. And, you know, they've lost 5. So if they lose against Oregon, they'll lose 6, and I'll be right around what I said that they were going to be. With that being said, they won against USC. They won against Michigan. And Northwestern has been playing fairly decent this year, just like I told everybody that they would. Like, they've been a fairly competitive team for the most part. I mean, they're 4-6 this season, but I can't take away the fact that they beat Maryland, who has been giving teams trouble all year long, 37-10. They beat Purdue in overtime. I get that, you know, and they kept it pretty competitive until the second half of that game against Indiana. So I don't want to say Northwestern is a pushover. People thought that they were going to go winless this year for whatever reason. I've actually heard that theory. But the thing about Oregon is they are going to have to go in with a different challenge against Washington. And they're going to be playing them at home. Doesn't necessarily say in this specific game that makes a difference with Washington, but it absolutely does this year because the team has changed so much. Washington has beat everybody's expectations under Jedd Fisch, and I don't know why we even, you know, doubted this dude was going to have, you know, a 6-5 season and then on the birth of another bowl season, which is crazy to think about. Brand new coach, they lost a lot of weapons. They lost a lot to the draft. They lost their coach, and Jedd Fisch comes in and does what he did at Arizona and makes them a winning program. I think it's crazy for us to doubt what Jedd Fisch is going to be able to do against Oregon. And if anything, Wisconsin gave them the best blueprint on how to beat Oregon from this past weekend. It was 16-13 that game was against Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, by all accounts, we understand how good Luke Fickell was, but this is almost a similar team. They're 5-5, right?
Yeah.
Took a loss against Penn State, got the brakes beat off of them by Iowa. And then after getting the brakes beat off of them, they come against Oregon and put 16, have a 16-13 game. Braden Locke is a better quarterback than what people give him credit for. We saw this last year when Hayden was with us. Hayden even says the same thing. That's his team. we didn't want to see what's his name jump in there, and he got hurt early in the season. But that's neither here nor there. Like, these guys have been kind of gatekeeping the Big Ten so far. But I wouldn't want to say that this was a push over. Yeah, I would take their win against Wisconsin more personal than I would against their win against Boise State. Having that close of a win against Boise State was scary. But would you say that Wisconsin and Boise State on paper are, if they were to play, that wouldn't have been a close game either?
I think Boise State would have their way with Wisconsin.
You do? Oh, okay.
I mean, I think should. I don't know if they would, right? Because I think that Oregon should have had their way against Wisconsin, but they clearly didn't, right? Yeah. It's one of those things where, the expectation is there, but some teams don't match up quite as well. Again, I think that Boise State should. I don't know if they would.
Yeah. I think honestly the best thing that could have happened to Oregon was to take a close win against Wisconsin, going into a team that's very similar as far as record and their margin of wins so far this season, and going into Wisconsin or going into Washington and saying that we can't take you guys for granted, right? Mm-hmm. And I know we talked about Oregon a lot. It's because they're the most polarizing team out of the two. And Army has had a Heisman of a looking quarterback this year, as you can get for, especially for a military academy school like Army. But with that being said, I think it's an equal chance that both of these guys end up not having a perfect record going into their championship game. The only difference is Oregon's got one more game to play, which is an important one, versus Army, who's got theoretically two more games to play and a championship game. So, if I had to say who's going to have the perfect record going into the championship game, it's definitely Oregon for me, because I think, the buck stops with Notre Dame this week. But again, who knows? Yeah, the Army could win out and then go undefeated and then beat Tulane, and then we're all looking at each other like we have five heads and saying, "Damn." Well, go back to this topic, and we were wrong. Hey, Army ended up being undefeated.
If Bryson Daly proves us wrong, that's buy a jersey moment right there. You lead Army to an undefeated season with wins over Notre Dame and Tulane and some of these teams. That's I respect it. He's already rushed for over 1,000 yards. They
get over Boise State, right? If they're the conference champions, they would be one of the 4 schools, wouldn't they?
I mean, I think I think you might knock out the Big 12. Like think about that, right? If you're Army and you win out, and Boise State also wins out, the Big 12 is absolutely getting left out, especially if BYU loses to Arizona State this week, because then Colorado, right, is suddenly in. They would
all be two lost teams in the conference.
2 lost teams. Colorado's not even guaranteed a spot at that point. I know they've gotten a lot of buzz, but then you're looking at 2 lost conference teams like Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, a lot of these in Arizona State as well.
Yeah.
All these teams would be in a big tiebreaker, and I don't know how it shapes out quite yet, but I don't see any of them making the playoffs or even having a better win over Army at that point. Like, if Army does win out. So if Army does win out, right? Although that also probably knocks Notre Dame out. If you're Notre Dame, you do not make the playoffs losing to Army, even if they're undefeated, and Northern Illinois. That is inexcusable, right? Yeah. You have teams in the top, in the top 10, top 12. Tennessee lost to Arkansas, right? You have Alabama, who lost to Vandy. Notre Dame's still in there. They lost to NIU, but you throw an Army to the mix there, and you're not in the conference, Notre Dame's out. So that does free up another spot. So maybe the Big 12 champion gets in with an at-large bid. But Army is definitely one of the top 5 ranked conference champions if they win out. And yes, there could be an argument for them being ranked above Boise State and Army gets a first round bye, and Boise State gets, potentially, screwed out of that bye week. But, either way, I think if Army wins out, both Boise and Army will make it. Then it's just an interesting thing to watch of who is ranked higher. So who gets that bye week? Because I don't think the Big 12 makes it in this scenario.
I'm going to make a very interesting scenario for you right here.
All right.
Think about it like this. Let's say that the Big 12 does get knocked out. Okay. And they end up as the 12th seed for whatever reason. No, let's say they end up as a 12th seed. Let's say it's Colorado. I hope this plays out. Colorado plays Notre Dame. Colorado wins against Notre Dame, and they go against Army as their matchup. Man, black and gold, and that would be the most watched game of all time, because not only do you have all the military academies, let's just roll it up like this: Air Force and Navy are going to be rooting for Army, right? Yeah. And if Colorado, if Colorado gets smacked around by Army with a bunch of guys that cannot can't transfer, and also can't stay more than 4 years, that's going to be hilarious. It would just be the icing on the Colorado cake for me this year. But that scenario could possibly happen in the way that you're saying, because it would be possibly, Boise State maybe ahead of Army if they don't get justified, and Army will play the winner of maybe a Notre Dame in Colorado. I think that would be enough chaos, not only for the Colorado fans to go around and say, you guys are wrong, blah, 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 blah. But then if you get smacked by Army and Army makes it to the semifinals, that'd be hilarious on his own right, too.
Yeah.
Because Army's going to have to play the next best team, which is probably going to be Oregon, right? If they went out. So, but it would be, again, it's up to the committee has the toughest job this year, because there's so many Cinderella story transitions that could happen over the next couple of weeks that can make this 12-team playoff very, very interesting. And it's not in the bylaws. It's not that they can't match up teams based on however they want to. It could be justified however they want to when we get down, when that last selection day happens. And yes, we will be going live for that.
Yeah.
When that selection day happens that last week, I'm going to be very interested to see what storylines the committee is going to come up with. It's hard to justify last year the Pac-12 having the year that they had and then just disappearing. It's a shame that we don't have them as a conference this year. But then also, it gives them they have the biggest excuse to give us games, not only to remind us of our past, what the teams like Boise State to go against good teams and see how that matchup would be, but to make the storylines of what we saw today with the different conference teams just playing each other. What was it, Ole Miss, and what was the other team?
Ole Miss played Indiana.
Like Ole Miss and Indiana, you would never imagine them playing.
Yeah.
But how exciting of a game would that be? And that's why it's so hard to do mock drafts and stuff this early, guys. It's like a lot of these players' legacies and their draft stocks are dependent on how well they play in these big games. It really is. People are going to wipe out of their memory of like how good that these teams have been. But if it gets down to that level and they start playing really, really well, move over Shedeur Sanders, move over Cam Ward. Literally, these guys can take a back seat to guys like Jalen Milroe, who took a back seat for a little bit. But if he takes his team to a national championship and it's because of him, if you don't think that Jalen Milroe might not be the number one quarterback in this draft after that, you got to be kidding yourselves. Or Curtis Rourke wins out. We already know how he is, but like his draft stock, he's going to be the consensus number one.
Yeah, look at JJ McCarthy. I mean, Michigan just won a national championship. Do you think that if they lost to Alabama, that his draft stock would have been as high as it was?
After throwing 3 interceptions against Bowling Green? Nah.
Yeah, like it was like look, he's a winner, right? Like, look at what he did. Like, he led his team to a national championship. All of these things.
Yeah.
That is fed by the fact that he won games in the playoffs when it mattered most. He won games, right? If you don't do that, you know, maybe some of the evaluations and the film, right? That doesn't change from previous games, but at least the perception of this guy as a winner, the perception of this guy as someone who can lead winning teams, someone who has been there and done that, it looks completely different.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Players, you know, the postseason is so important because even in bowl games, right? You can have heroes at the bowl games. You have people in the postseason who really make their mark. I mean, same thing with like the Senior Bowl or other All-Star games. It happens. It even happens in the high school recruiting world. You have these Under Armour All-American games. You have all of these, you know, All-Star games, the Polynesian Bowl. The best high school players, they have their rankings, they have their ratings. But when you take a look at them in kind of this stage after the regular season and in between then and the next stage, their stock, you know, goes up, it goes down, things change. It's the same exact thing here. Whether it's a bowl game, whether it's the playoffs or conference championship game, your perception of players can change by these games because of the weight that these games have. The
magnitude,
yeah, like it's a massive game. When you have someone who comes up in the clutch, who is a hero in one of these games, right? You're telling me that Jackson Smith and Jigba's, you know, Rose Bowl game where he set records, right? I think it was like 300 yards, a handful of touchdowns. You're telling me that his stock would have been as high as it was if he didn't have that game? No way. No way.
Let me ask you a question. So the knock on Dillon Gabriel is what?
The knock on Dillon Gabriel, his size.
Okay. What team would he have to beat the brakes off of? Do you think right now that if he beats them in convincing fashion and it's with his arm and his legs equally, will everybody turn a healthy eye to when it comes to draft season?
I mean, I think it's going to be any team that they just haven't played who people hold in high regard. It could be an Alabama. It could be a Georgia, right? I think those are probably the first two teams that come to mind. But also keep an eye out for, like, you know, if he beats Ohio State again in dominant fashion, and yes, that's the other one, Texas. Because first of all, Texas, right? They've faced a 𝗕𝘂𝘂𝗀𝗂𝘂 who is dynamic in the running game. They only won by 3, right? But they've already faced a quarterback like him. So you kind of have a measuring stick of what to expect in how they respond to these kind of dual threat quarterbacks. But they also have the top ranked defense in the country. So, and they just played Jalen Green, who's also very mobile. If Dillon Gabriel goes out there and has his way against a team like that, no one's going to care about the size. I mean, that's what happened with Kyler Murray, right? You know, yep. I know, you know, he played so well against his competition. No one cared about how small he was because he was so good on the field.
Yep.
He won a Heisman. Dillon Gabriel doesn't necessarily need to win a Heisman here, but if he goes out there and balls out, it's going to be hard for teams to deny the talent that he is because, you know, you look at Oregon, their best wins, Ohio State and Boise State. Ohio State does have one of the best defenses in the country, but if you put Dillon Gabriel, who, like you said, people have questions about his size, you get to see him against a Georgia or an Alabama, Ohio State again in a Big Ten championship game or even the playoffs or a Texas, and he balls out. How can you see that much volume, that much success in that much volume against top opponents and say, nah, man, that size is a problem, right? Like,
we never had these question marks.
What was that?
No, I was saying it's crazy because the amount of quarterbacks that we have in the league that have success and even been drafted really, really high, and nobody cared about their size. And I'm going to name a couple. Baker Mayfield.
Mm-hmm.
He's a small guy. Kyler Murray, you already mentioned him. Russell Wilson. Bryce Young.
Drew Brees.
Tua Tagovailoa. Like all these guys are not like huge guys, and they're fairly short for their size. So for people to be like, "Oh, he's not gonna make it because of his size," but like, we're not going around saying that Baker, Kyler, or Russell Wilson right now are not balling out at their size. Size,
come on.
Like we need to stop that. Any defense with NFL size winning covers a magnitude of sins. That is actual facts, Dana. Yeah. So I just want to have that conversation about Dillon Gabriel real quick because regardless of the game that he just had against Wisconsin, he didn't cost his team the game. And then also on the other side of that, the dude's been making NFL throws his whole career. You know, you're not like, and he's going through adversity. He was at UCF when they were a Group of 5 school. He was at Oklahoma through the transition with Brent Venables. He was and battled an injury, and he beat Texas last year when they made the college football playoff, and he put that team on his back. This is a team that the committee said was a top 4 team last year, and Dillon Gabriel beat them in season last year.
Yep, and he was the only one to do it. He led a game-winning drive with under like 2 minutes left in a rivalry game, and also I'll mention the first time he played in that rivalry game, his first year at Oklahoma, he was injured. So he didn't play against Texas that year. His first time playing in the Red River rivalry game, he goes out there against the best team Texas has fielded probably since they went to a national championship in 2009. He led a game-winning drive to take down eventually the playoff-bound Texas Longhorns, right?
Yeah.
And he's, like you said, he's had success at every destination, right? Now, part of that is, he's had the same offensive coordinator, right? And Jeff Lebby at both UCF and Oklahoma. Well, what does he do as soon as he and Lebby part ways, right? Lebby's now the head coach of Mississippi State, and now you have a new play caller, Will Stein, out in Eugene. Oh, he's balling out again. Like, new place this time for the first time, new play caller, new teammates again. It doesn't matter.
And who's the young gun backup that he had to beat up? Dante Moore.
Dante Moore.
So, and he's dealt with that adversity everywhere. Who was the quarterback at UCF that got hurt that he had to fill in for?
Oh, it was Mackenzie Milton.
And what did Mackenzie Milton? Remember Mackenzie Milton's that season? Everybody was like, "Yo,
yeah,
he's a Heisman candidate right now."
And then he had that.
And that same game had that leg injury when everybody was hyping him up. Dillon Gabriel had to come in and make a name for himself. And then they're like this. They're like best friends too, which is great.
I mean, because they're both from Hawaii.
Oh, Mackenzie Milton is a Oos too?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Hold up. He played for Florida State. I didn't know that.
Yeah, bro. Let me check where he went to high school, but yes, they went to the same high school. They both went to Mililani.
Oh, okay. So
that explains a lot, right? They both went to the same high school, both played quarterback, they both went to UCF together, right? I mean,
the storylines write themselves.
No, I just think, Gabriel, you can look past the size. Not every quarterback plays, a perfect game every single week. That's just how it is. Good teams even win close games. That's what I'll say. So,
and he's missing his top target right now. Tej Johnson has been hurt.
Yeah. I mean, look, losing or barely winning a game against a tough team in a new environment. Come on, it's not like Oregon is used to playing in Madison, Wisconsin, right? Maybe there's some unexpected struggles, like there were. It doesn't mean that they're not worthy of that top spot. It doesn't mean that Dillon Gabriel's not going to be a good quarterback. I mean, like you said, J.J. McCarthy was a first-round pick, and he threw 3 interceptions against who?
Bowling Green.
Bowling Green.
And nobody batted an eye. Okay.
Yeah, but he won. And like Dana said, winning covers a multitude of sins. 3 interceptions against Bowling Green, swept under the rug. Why? You win a national championship. And you're undefeated that season. Oregon is already 11-1. They've really secured, they've mathematically secured a spot in the Big Ten championship game. They've really already secured a spot in the college football playoffs. If you're Dillon Gabriel and you go out there and win a national championship, no one's going to care that you only beat Wisconsin 16-13 in Madison. They're going to care that you won a natty.
Yep.
That's what matters.
Nasty work.